Alright, so for the last part of the layout of Photoshop, we're going to talk about probably one of the most important parts, which is called layers. So your layers panel is over here on the right hand side. Within that layers panel, there's also something called channels and paths. For right now, we're just going to stick with the layers, and let's go ahead and talk about that. And to help drive home the point of what layers are, I want you to do this with me. So I want you to create a new document. Remember, Control N on the keyboard if you don't have a new one open. And go ahead and switch that photo preset. Let's do an 8.5 by 11. Make sure we're in inches. Make sure our resolution is 300, and we'll leave these defaults as is. So go ahead and make that new document. You'll notice in my window area up here, I got 3 documents. I haven't saved this one, so let's do a file, save as. Let's give it the proper naming convention. Let's go last name underscore first name underscore, we'll call it layers. And just save it into your student folder for right now. We really have no specific spot for this. It's just practice again. And we'll leave it as a Photoshop document and go ahead and save it. So once you've gone ahead and done that, your layers are over here. The default is always going to be background, and it's typically going to have a lock on it, which means you can't edit that layer. It'll stay locked. So we're just going to quickly make a few things. There's nothing really specific about what I'm about to do, so yours doesn't have to look exactly like mine. You just want to kind of go through the motions with me to learn about layers. So I'm just going to click on the text tool over here in the tools panel. I'm going to left click, hold, and drag out a box. Doesn't matter how big, you pick. And I'm just going to type a word. Let's call it Photoshop layers. Okay, you can highlight the text if you want. Let's change the font, and let's go a little bit bigger maybe here. Sure, that's fine. And I'm just going to click, and then I'm going to hit escape on the keyboard. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. I'm going to left click, hold, drag out a text box again. Photoshop layers. Highlight it. Let's go bigger. I'm going to change the color from black to maybe blue by clicking that box. And then I'm going to click on the move tool. I can move this layer around while I have it selected. Notice it's kind of got that grayish look to it. So I'm moving this text layer around while I have it selected. So there's one layer. Notice that it's sitting on top of the background. Okay. The other thing that I can do over here in the layers palette or panel is create a new layer, which is this icon right here. So when I click on that, it creates layer 1, and I'm going to rename this layer. To do that, you have to make sure that you're hovering on the text here, the name of it, and you double click. If you're not hovering on the text and you double click somewhere here, it's going to open up this layer style window, which you don't want to get into yet. We just want to rename the layer, so make sure you hover over that, and let's just call this colored background, or BG for background, whatever you want to do, and click off of it. Now that layer is sitting on top of this text layer, so I want to change the background to something colored. So I'm going to go up into my colors panel, and I'm going to pull this slider up. I want to go somewhere in the red, so I changed the foreground color to red. And then over here in the tools panel, if I hover over this one, there's something called paint bucket, and the keyboard shortcut is G. We'll go more in depth of what these tools do later, but I just wanted you to pay attention to that. And then if I left click, it has now changed my background to red. But the problem is that it's sitting on top of my text. So layers, you got to pay attention to what's on top of other layers. So what I need to do is move this text layer above the background. So I'm going to left click, select that layer, left click, hold and drag, and move it up above. And notice now that the text is showing up. I can go back to my move tool. I can move that wherever I want. So that is quickly a good explanation on what layers are. To turn the layers off, You can hide them by clicking the eyes so that way they can go away. Maybe you only want to see one layer. If you want to work on a layer, it has to be selected. What I see a lot of times is someone's selected on one layer and what they're really trying to do is change something on a different one. So you have to make sure that the one that you're trying to work on is always highlighted gray. So some key things to take away from layers. Make sure that you're always naming them by double clicking them. That's very, very important. Make sure that you're highlighting them gray when you're trying to work on that specific layer. And make sure that they're always in the right order. So that is quickly how you can make new layers. The other thing that you could do is you could delete them. So if I want to get rid of this colored background, I click it, highlight it, hit the garbage can. Are you sure you want to delete it? Yes, I can get rid of it. If you want to get rid of the lock, just simply double click it and I'll cancel this and the layer, or that layer, is now unlocked. If you want to lock the layer again, like let's say you change it to red and you don't want that thing to be touched, you don't want to accidentally mess it up, you can then lock it. But I want to change this again. We'll call this red background because remember, you should always rename your layers. Left click it and let's say I want to lock it. I don't want anything to happen to that. I could still turn it on or off, but it is now locked. I can't edit it, so if I tried moving it, it's not going to let me. It'll say you can't because it's locked, so that will be helpful in the future. So that is probably the longest video you'll watch, and it is layers because that one's important.